Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us. Welcome to session 7 of the Human and Social Services track. This is Elder Fraud and Abuse. My name is Seth. I'm your room host. We've made it to the final session of Iowa Ideas 2020, but we're not done quite yet. After this session, we hope you enjoy the closing keynote with David Kennedy from the National Network for Safe Communities. Then be sure to stick around for the Big Ideas social meetup starting at noon to do some networking and learn more about some of the initiatives that you can get involved in. Now, before we begin our session, I have just a few quick reminders. First, feel free to submit your questions and comments related to today's topic using Whova's chat feature, and I'll pass them along to Michael, our session moderator. Also, don't forget to use the hashtag Iowa Ideas 2020 on social media to share any insights and inspiration you take away from the conference. And finally, a question we've heard a lot throughout the conference is, can I still see a session that I missed? Yes, you can. If you missed a session, they are all being recorded and archived on iowaideas.com, so you can go back and check them out after the conference. With that said, I'm going to turn it over to our session moderator, Michael Chevy Castranova. Michael.
Thank you, Seth. Thank you, everyone, for joining us here this morning. Still morning, right? This is Iowa Ideas Conference year of the pandemic. So the good news is by doing it virtually, we get more people. And I think we have almost 1,000 people signed up this year, which is great. And also we can have all kinds of great panelists from all over the place. Today, we're going to talk about elder fraud and abuse, which is a pretty huge, wide-ranging subject. It's always been with us. It seems to be with us more, but that's what we're going to talk about. To start, I want to ask each of our panelists to tell us your name, your title, where you work, and just a little, brief summary about where you are and how you got here today. And going to my right on my screen, Theresa, would you go first, please?
Sure. My name is Theresa Davison. I work for Milestones Area Agency on Aging. I am the adult rights specialist here, and basically my job is looking into investigating abuse claims within the independent adult realm. And I've been with Milestones for about 2 years, and I work for the state of Illinois for 5 doing adult protective services.
Thank you. Brian? What brings you here today?
I'm Brian Kaskie. I'm a professor of health policy over in the College of Public Health at the University of Iowa. I am almost exclusively interested in what happens to older Americans, persons over 65, in terms of how they intersect with the policy world. So what do we do with our laws and our regulations and our programs and services? And how does that help or hinder in this case, persons from being victims of elder abuse and neglect? So we do studies and evaluations on that topic, and then push those out for wider dissemination. And then I get invited to forums like this, so we can kind of just review what I found and hopefully how it intersects with what the other folks on the panel do.
Okay, thanks. Laura, you're next.
Good morning. My name is Laura Kriegermeier. I'm the Elder Rights Coordinator at Heritage Area Agency on Aging, Cedar Rapids area. I am the one that takes the referrals or calls for elder abuse and kind of screens through them and works with our elder rights specialist to help provide advocacy, emotional support, investigation, anything into that abuse to try to help them get out of that abuse. I have a background working in mental health and also in elderly waiver case management as well. So I've always had an interest in working with vulnerable older adults.
Thank you. Chantelle.
Hello, everybody. Good morning. I am Chantelle Smith. I am an Assistant Attorney General at the Attorney General's office. I have been with the office for 20 years now. At this point, I think I have represented all or nearly all agencies in Iowa that have some hand in the lives of older Iowans. Currently, I am in the Consumer Protection Division and primarily handle issues, abuse, scams, you name it, affecting older Iowans. I also head up the Abuse in Later Life Coordinated Community Response Team which if you're interested in, I can get you information and you can become a member of that as well. But thank you all for being here.
Yeah, maybe toward the end, Chantelle, you can give us a website or something for that. Okay, so Theresa, I'm going to start with you. And I saw a video that you did on YouTube about this. What are some of the signs of self-neglect among the elderly, and what can we do about it? What are we talking, if you give us a definition what that means?
Yeah, absolutely.
And what are we talking about, and what can we, as family, friends, neighbors, how do we recognize it, and what do we do about that?
Yeah. So self-neglect involves a mentally competent senior or adult with a disability who fail to meet their own essential physical, psychological, or social needs. And when they fail to meet these needs, his or her health become, threatened basically. So it's considered self-neglect because it's the individual. It's not an outside party that's causing the, neglect or abuse or anything like that. So basically what, I'm seeing a rise in self-neglect and self-neglect calls within my area. Basically, I just feel like they're just, not enough. They don't know the resources that may be out there. So we'll get calls in, and usually it is a neighbor or someone, that has worked with them. But basically the signs of self-neglect are, unsanitary living conditions, the pest infestations, trash. Hoarding is a very big one, and hoarding to the point where it becomes dangerous. It becomes a fall risk. It becomes a fire hazard. We know a lot of people that collect stuff, so there just will be piles of things that I've gone into homes where I can barely go through the door, and the doors are somewhat, blocked from the stuff that they may be keeping. And then there's like the squalor hoarding also, which is trash and leftover food and just kind of rotting things, possible like feces, animal feces, things like that. And also we come across unsafe living conditions, houses in disrepair, no working plumbing, no heat. I had a client who did not have working water in her home, and she was using a bucket, and it had been ongoing for 6 months, almost, close to a year before she allowed us to come in to do anything. And it was just kind of her way of life. That's just what she did, which was, of course, that's like, oh my gosh, how could you, live that way? But for her, it was just kind of her norm. She was also a hoarder. I think she was worried that the fact that, somebody would come in, take her from her home, do things like that. But we just wanted to assist her the best possible way we could. Get the water working, get the plumbing going, things like that. Keep her home safe so she could remain in her home. So things like that. Lack of food in the home, spoiled food, unclean clothing, that's just kind of like the start. They're just very disheveled, just old clothing, food left on the clothing, possible, odors and smells, and where it's a consistent basis, especially with somebody, I've had calls in from banks that, oh, Miss, Jones has come in today and, her hair wasn't combed and she's usually really made up and she was wearing the same thing she was wearing days ago. Concerns like that will get those calls because that was kind of not her norm. She was always very presentable, hair always well-maintained, clothes always clean, things like that. So just kind of, they caught it because she would come into the bank once a week and they would notice that her, appearance was going down, and they noticed that somebody was accompanying her to the bank also, which ended up being going into a financial exploitation type of case. Also, in the self-neglect realm, a lack of medical equipment, maybe no walkers, wheelchairs, hearing aids, glasses, anything they need to keep going, to help them, able to see, able to hear, things like that. A big one on the financial portion of it is unpaid bills, shut-off notices, bounce checks, things like that, stacks of unopened mail. I have gone into homes where there's just mail sitting on a table and it's this high. they're not getting their bills, they're not paying their bills, they're getting notices for different things. It could be where they have to, reapply for any of their assistance that they're getting, like, food assistance, and they're missing those deadlines because they're not opening their mail. So that's always a good thing to look for. And then also, things, bed sores, skin rashes, things that are kind of gone out of control where they're not receiving that medical treatment. Also, we know that infections that can turn septic, which can, affect their ability to make an informed decision. I had a client that had gangrene on his feet. His toes were literally black, and he refused medical treatment, and he felt that gasoline was the solution. And he continuously would pour gasoline on his toes. And again, there was a mental, issue there, I believe, definitely, because he really felt that he was going to save his toes by pouring gasoline on them. And again, they ended up taking the toes, but it was a long time before he allowed help. I mean, that was with ambulance and law enforcement and they could not force him to go. So that's the other thing too, is, working in the field, I feel that self-neglect is a touchy subject. And there is a balance between poor choices, the proper ability to make those choices, and also the right to self-determination. That's the biggest thing. If we get calls from a family member, why aren't you doing anything? Mom's living in this, living like this. If mom is competent and she refuses the assistance, there's really not a whole lot we can do, even on the public health side of it, or even with, law enforcement or ambulance. If someone refuses to go with them, they cannot forcibly take them. And I have seen this, and it's a battle and it's a struggle, and it's very sad. However, they still have the right to self-determination. And I always have to kind of remind myself that they have that right. But I'm
going to want to bring Chantelle into that, because that's a good point.
Absolutely.
Before we do that, Brian, from your vantage point, and you're studying these things, how widespread an issue is this in terms of self-neglect?
These stories are common. I mean, I think everybody on this panel could probably give us a perspective on heck, Theresa brought up so many different things in there. Financial exploitation is a big one, right? So people who are at home like this, and not only are they living in a difficult situation, whether it's taking care of themselves or keeping up their home, they're targeted. They're targeted by outside groups who will call them and have dubious pretense, like they're from the latest, Senate campaign or campaign for president, and they'll get these people to engage and eventually start taking money from them. And so that's a big one too. So people are coming in from outside the state of Iowa. People don't live here, and they're taking advantage of our older citizens who just, for whatever reason, right? Theresa probably has 100 stories too about how they got there, right? It's not like these people all started at this point in life, Some of them, this may just be the way they are, but others of them may be getting Alzheimer's disease. Their family doesn't know. So yeah, she touched on a number of great points and things we should probably be paying more attention to in the public policy space.
Laura, to keep it on this subject of self-abuse, because you're right, there are so many other different ways we can go with this, and we will. What do you see from your perspective? I mean, how common are these things that Theresa was talking about?
Just like Theresa said, I think this is just very common. We're seeing this all the time. Probably one of the most reported types of abuse. And it's not self-reported. It's always reported by a concerned family member or friend. I think the biggest thing, to touch on with this subject is that a lot of people are not accepting of help or trying to self-isolate in these situations because they are afraid that they're going to be removed from the situation, whether it be institutionalized early or maybe have, people in their home, touching their things, trying to throw away their things that they don't want to get rid of. I think that, the trend now is that we definitely, you know, the area agencies and other service providers for older adults, our goal is to try to keep people in their home or wherever they're comfortable as long as possible. But I think that there's this instilled fear in a lot of these older adults that, you know, if one person comes in and sees this, they're going to take me away and you know, I'm going to be away from all of this, and that's not what I want. I think that, you know, that's one of the biggest challenges in getting in there to help these individuals is trying to find something that, you know, they may be of interest of that we can help them with, whether it's starting really slow by, you know, introducing Meals on Wheels and saying, here, I noticed, you know, someone saying you don't have a lot of food. Why don't we start with that? Like, let's get some meals coming in the home. You know, and that's, again, like with her person that was being financially exploited, they might not have money for food because someone might be taking their money. And so let's just start slow here. Let's try to get something going in your home. You know, maybe it's offering some help to get the outside cleaned because people are complaining to the city about how the home appearance is looking. And then, you know, if someone comes in and sees inside, then, oh, that's going to, you know, create another problem because then the city might come in and placard the home or condemn the home. So I definitely, as Theresa said, we're seeing increases in this. And I think especially in our service area, we had that devastating storm. I think people that were living in these conditions before are now in a situation where their home might be unlivable because of the storm, and they're trying to ride it out as long as possible. But with the weather changes and it getting colder, it's going to get worse. And that's a big fear of ours, is that that's just going to, you know, we're going to find people that are living in a home with, you know, part of the roof torn off and they're freezing.
Right. So Chantelle, I have so many questions for you, but let's just pick one of them for right now. Theresa mentioned, so you come across a neighbor, an elderly neighbor who might be having some issues. There might be some, you suspect some self-neglect, but of course, you know, we don't really know that. And she said, well, we don't have, and I don't mean to put words in your mouth, Theresa, but implied that we don't have a lot of legal recourse. Do we? I mean, what can you do without, you know, starting trouble, as it were?
You mean in the sense of what can you do when that person refuses?
Yes.
Assistance?
What do you do if you really want, you're trying to help?
I think when it comes to those self-neglect cases, what we see happen are reports to DHS, of course, if you've got the basis to allege this is a dependent adult. And that's frustrating sometimes because you have people who call DHS and say, I'm concerned about my 65-year-old neighbor. And the question to you is, you know, something like, well, how does he handle his activities of daily living? Well, I don't know. I don't live in the house. I'm just telling you I see concerns and I have concerns. But self-neglect is one thing that DHS can assist with, and they have some limitations as well, right? They can't go in and force people to do things that people don't want to do. But, you know, there are some options, like you can look at possibly at a commitment. If a person is having mental health issues, you can look at getting a protective order under the DHS statutes if it's rising to that level. You know, there also, you may have people, I hate to even bring this up because I think it's way overused, but there are some people who could use the assistance of a guardian, for example, and may qualify as a person who needs a guardian. So, you know, there are options that we can explore, though I think most of us who do a lot of work in this area are, like Theresa and Laura, very cognizant of an adult's ability to make their own decisions. But, you know, sometimes I think, and again, I hate to say this, but sometimes we go even a little too far with that and we don't step back and say, okay, is this person really capable of making those decisions? Do they have the capacity to make healthcare decisions like this? And we seem to live in the extremes of either we rush in there and we say that a person doesn't have capacity, or we stand back, you know, put our hands up and say, it's choice. I think it'd be good for all of us if we could explore and live a little bit more in the middle, frankly.
And when you say guardian, just to be clear, you are talking about a legal guardian who has power of attorney and can control your bank account and things like that.
Well, not a power of attorney. A power of attorney is different than a guardian. And under state law, a guardian takes care of the body, we'll say. So medical decisions, where do you live, what treatments do you receive, going to the dentist, every day, how do you live life, sorts of things. The conservator takes care of the money. So oftentimes we see someone who has a guardian and a conservator, but it doesn't have to be that way. And you could have someone who has a POA, so they've got an agent under a power of attorney document, but I think in most of those self-neglect cases that we see, I don't see very often that they have someone who is an agent under a power of attorney. It seems to me most of the time they don't have anybody who is really engaged in their life. They have family, but family has said, I don't know what to do anymore. I'm out. So a guardianship, it's imposed by a judge. You have to go through a court proceeding. It's a very serious proceeding, should be a very serious proceeding. It also can be very expensive. So, you got to find what works for people.
And it comes to the judge by way of, I assume, family members?
It most often is a family member. A person can request a guardian for themselves. Most often it's a family member. It doesn't have to be a family member. It has to be somebody who has an interest. And clear, this person has to go in there and basically prove up a case. So you're probably not going to see, just some neighbor who's a little bit interested. It's got to be somebody who really knows something and has a stake in it. But it's not limited to family members.
Okay. We have talked around about, and it's always there, we've talked about scams. And there have always been scams, and I don't know if there are more of them. The Cedar Rapids Better Business Bureau does a guest column every month in the Gazette, and it's about scams every single time. And I know it's really simple to say, hang up the phone, don't give anyone your credit card number, and yet it keeps happening. So Brian, I see you nodding your head. Can you talk to us for a little bit? What sort of scams are we seeing? Are these really new? And if you have any sense of how much money are we talking about? I mean, they're giving away identities, cash, their cars. What's happening?
So put a number on it. It's about 1 out of 10 older persons are victims of something that crosses the line, whether that's a financial scam or otherwise. That's a ballpark number, because the research behind all this, what we call the surveillance or epidemiology, we just have no real good idea if it's 25% or 5%. Most people settle about 10% of older persons. Of all those, a lot of them go unreported, as Laura mentioned. They don't want to get the public involved. They don't want the police coming to their house. They don't want their neighbors to know. So that's why these numbers are a wide range. We just don't know. People don't talk about this. So after that, how many of them actually get fully investigated and taken to court as needed, criminally investigated? The numbers plummet. And so let's say Theresa or somebody on the front line like Laura goes to a home and they see something like this, they have to pass that information along. It doesn't stop with them and whether or not they're doing a good job. They did their job by identifying it. And then the next part of the chain, and a typical analogy people use in this service field is silos. I moved here from the West Coast a long time ago. I kept hearing this phrase silos. I didn't really know what it meant until, I got out and about in Iowa and I go, oh, I get it. These things are all kind of doing the same thing, but they're separated. They don't come together. And so that's a big, I think all three of my fellow panelists would notice is there's a lack of coordination from one point in the system to the next. And so let me finish by saying, just ask yourself, when you go to your doctor's office, they have to coordinate. Think how many different people in that puzzle needed to come together. You needed to have a parking lot to go drive into. Somebody had to figure out how to set that up. Then you had to walk into the front of the hospital where there's guest services who walk you, if you need to your doctor's office. When you're in your office and they order a blood test or an x-ray test or anything else in that healthcare world, they take you there, okay? Then those x-rays or blood tests are drawn and you can go back to your doctor's office to get a opinion, like, Bob, it looks like you broke your wrist. Now you need to go down to the pharmacy. I mean, on and on and on, but each one of those points is coordinated. We don't have that here. We don't have that level of coordination, and it matters. Over there in Des Moines, they have what's called a multidisciplinary coordination treatment team. These folks get together and they review cases together and they connect. Then it works. Then we improve the system. So all these folks, we're doing the best we can. we need to be connected like a doctor gets connected. I mean, why? It's not hard to figure out. Banks do the same thing. And so to your point about also how this can help or matter, if a doctor sees something, you know, bruising is another big indicator. There's a lot of research that says when an older adult appears in the emergency room, you check for bruising, right? Because they'll always say, oh, I just fell. Well, those bruising marks vary in what the indicators are, like blood clotting. Any emergency physician should know this, but they don't, and they don't look for it because they don't know what to do with the information. Where do I go next with this? So that's what we need. We need that connection to be more solid. I'll be quiet.
Okay. Not for too long. So, Theresa, back to this issue on scams. I mean, what are you seeing? What sort of scams you're hearing about? Are these, this isn't new, is it? It's just more new because of social media and telephones?
I think so too. And I think with our, you know, some of our more savvy older adults, they're on social media. I had a woman in her mid 60s and she had like Facebook, and she was recently widowed, and she lost close to $150,000 in a romance scam. She was lonely, and this person, I mean, I don't know if they read the obituaries, and then, you know, she's on this, or actually she had joined a group for new widows, something to that effect, you know, and she's there for support, but, you know, Joe Blow over here, he's there to see who he can scam, and he did. It went on, and, you know, writing her sweet messages and this and that, and she's responding, and again, she's lonely, she's vulnerable. She had come into money because of, you know, the life insurance, things like that. And yeah, it scammed right a bit. And the thing is, she didn't report it right away because she was so embarrassed. She was embarrassed. You know, law enforcement was involved and I was involved, but mine was more of an emotional support for her because, you know, I mean, she just cried and cried, and she just, I am so stupid. I can't believe I fell for this, you know, I mean, and it's easy to do. It was a romance scam, you know, some are different scams, you know, that people are still falling for, like the publishers clearing scams. You're going to get all this money, you know, you send us $500 or $5,000 and you're going to get $25,000. Oh, that sounds like a great deal. Why wouldn't I sign up for that? You know, $20,000 profit. You know, a lot of my seniors don't really have that kind of money, but, you know, they'll, you know, do their savings, or they'll do a smaller amount. You know, you send me 500, you said, oh, it's got to be Western Union, things like that. So they think they're going to come into big money because they're sending the money first and they're guaranteed to get, you know, triple the payment. I see that one a lot, you know, and that's been going around for a long time. But I think with like social media, things like that, it's just very easily to fall for, you know. I mean, even with the phone calls, with the robotic phone calls, I can have, you know, a call that'll pop up, you know, who's calling me, and it's a scam, you know, and here I'm thinking it's a legitimate number, or it's my area code of 563, and then they're not calling from my area, you know.
Sure.
So you see a lot of that too, where people, you know, they're very gullible into a way of saying, oh, well, my phone says it's this person, you know what I mean? And right. I'm going to believe that. So
just to add to that, get back to the number, I think Theresa's story, if you ask any Iowan, there's somebody in their family tree who's been victimized. I mean, to get back to it, we all know somebody.
Yeah. So Laura, I saw you nodding your head during that.
Yeah.
What do you see, and how do you advise? How do you advise people, and just if you even know about it?
Yeah, I mean, I think like Theresa said, this is very common. I think, we're also seeing a lot of cases where it's fulfilling some kind of need for these people that are getting these phone calls, or they are talking to these scammers, even when they find out that it's actually, that they're not who they say they are, it's still somehow fulfilling a need. And so I think that's an important piece to all of this, is that it's not just, report it and let's, get police involved. There's a lot of layers to it. But, I think that we're seeing a lot of this. And not only is it, a robotic call, but we've also been seeing where there is a person on the other end of the line, and oftentimes they're from another country, but calling over and over again, tearing at somebody by just repeatedly calling, threatening them, looking up information about them, and saying, I know that you have a daughter, this is her name, and if you don't give me this money. And so I think that it's getting more complex. I think that, people are getting to the point where, they're trying to find, ways to get to people in all types of situations. It's not always just, a scam that's locally happening. It can happen to somebody that, from another country, or it can happen somebody's, next door neighbor is, financially exploiting them. I think it's just there's such an array of different types of scams happening that it's just becoming more and more widespread. And I think the way to target it and to try to help them really depends on the situation. And that's why I think it's important to have all the details, you reach out to, your local area agency to talk about it. Just consult over the phone, even if you're not convinced that you or the person that's being exploited is ready to do anything about it. But I think that these cases aren't so black and white. I think that there's just the more people involved to, talk about it and see how it can be unfolded, the more likely a good outcome can happen from it.
I had not heard that it had gotten to the level of where you say people are calling, they actually they know the name of your child, and they essentially are threatening violence or something if you don't send money. So this is more than, hey, I can come and fix your roof, but you have to pay me ahead of time, sort of thing. Are you seeing lots of those?
More, I would say. I'm not seeing a ton of that, but I think, it's important to talk about, because, the typical type of financial abuse, is that where, even right now after the storm, people are needing roof repairs or needing trees removed, different things like that, where they're paying someone up front and then the person's not following through, or someone's calling saying that they're the electric company and they're going to shut off their power if they don't go buy a bunch of Best Buy gift cards and give them the code on the back. I mean, there's all kinds of different types. I think there's not just one specific type that we see, but I think that it's important to note that sometimes people aren't going to follow through with anything because they are really afraid that something more could happen to them, or that something could happen to their family members. And so that's why it's important, I think, to make sure that, if you hear about it, you're, letting the area agency know, letting maybe DHS know if they're dependent, or letting law enforcement or the AG's office know, because, I think that there's just a lot more complexities with these cases that it's important for those details to be shared.
Okay, Chantelle, I want to come to you in a moment here to see what the Attorney General's perspective is on this. I do want to remind viewers again, don't wait till the last 5 minutes to send us your questions and comments. You can do that right now in the chat feature, and they will make their way to us. Please do that. So Chantelle, Some of these are scarier stories than I would have expected. How much of it makes its way up, if you were, up to the Attorney General's office, and what do you see, and what can be done next? What happens?
Well, actually, it's worse than what was just described. It's not just people calling and saying, I know who your daughter is. The grandparent scam is one of the most popular right now. And, that's calling and saying, Johnny, I got Johnny, and here's the issue. They know lots of information about you because companies are selling your information all the time. So, they just sit there with lists of information about you. You like to quilt, you like this, you like that. It's worse than that. People are now showing up at victims' homes. They're actually knocking on the door, which to me is, it's all unacceptable, but are you kidding me? They're actually showing up and knocking on the door. We had one case where people were showing up, Domino's delivery and Jimmy John's delivery drivers, and they weren't. But that's a very effective tool. It's easy enough to get online and describe someone's house to them, which is scary enough. But when you can say to someone on the phone, I'm actually sitting outside your house right now, and then to actually come and knock on the door, I'm here to pick up the money, is petrifying petrifying to the victim and petrifying to me, because I think we've now taken it up a notch. So those things are actually happening. And I can tell you the phones ring off the hook at the Consumer Protection Division with calls about scams and reports of scams. And I know we're only getting this many of them because people are embarrassed and humiliated. And when they call law enforcement, the truth of the matter is you have a very small chance of law enforcement actually responding to it, because they know, and they're mostly right, that thus far there's very little we can do about it. I think, well, it's just because we haven't tried hard enough, in my opinion. We just haven't gotten creative enough about it. It's not that you can't do it. It's just that we haven't done it. And we certainly could do better. So you've kind of hit on it's nails on a chalkboard for me. We talk a lot about scams, and I think scams are really, really important in that there's a lot of money flowing out, and it really does hurt people. What I try to stress at my office all the time is, you said something about hanging up the phone. I've been in the AG's office for 20 years, and it was going on before I got there, this notion of just hang up. These people are not stupid. They're not gullible. They're not dumb. Many of them are educated people. They are not falling for things. They are not getting duped. They have a hole that they are trying to fill. And I less often now, but in the past, frequently would go out and talk to victims, because people think we can wave a magic wand and change their mind. That's not true, because it isn't a matter of explaining to them that this is illogical and is not going to work out. They know that. I look in their eyes and I can see they know that, but that's not the hole they're trying to fill. And we're not addressing that issue because we don't like social work, right? Social work is squishy, and we don't know how to do it very well. And we like results. We like to go in and say, don't do that, and people stop doing it. So that's really what pains me when it comes to the scams, is we're left of center. The reason that the numbers, we've been spending all this time and money trying to combat scams, and the numbers are shooting up. It's not getting better, it's getting worse. Yes, is there more reporting? Certainly. But I don't think we can give ourselves that much credit. I think it's going up because it continues to be a problem, because we're not hitting at what is the actual issue here of isolation, of loneliness, of a lack of community, we've disempowered an entire category of people. When I go out and do presentations to seniors, you see their heads fall. And when I ask them, do you feel like you matter? Their jaws hit the table. They don't feel like they matter. And when you tell them that they do, you can see that's the first time they've felt that way in a very long time. And so we can go about, with all our law enforcement tools and all our policies and this and that. That's not going to solve the problem. It's not going to change it. And then you add to it that we talk so much about scams. 90% of abuse is committed by family members. And when I go in and talk to people who have been scammed, I now take the tact of saying, what's going on in your life? What's going on with your family? And one of them that was here in Des Moines, it was $400,000 and the money was still flowing out. I went there 3 or 4 times. And finally, the husband on one of our last visits admitted that their son had exploited them. And they never dealt with that. They never dealt with their son exploiting them. And there's the hole they were trying to fill by participating in these scams. And they were never going to fill that hole, but nobody was ever talking to them. Their family didn't talk to them about the exploitation. And when I asked their daughter, how did you help your parents deal with their son essentially robbing them? And she said, well, we didn't really talk about it. And my parents, took that money out of the will of what was left for him. Well, that doesn't do it. That doesn't heal a person when your child has betrayed you. So I feel like we're often left of center here, and we're missing the mark, and we're still aiming for the low fruit.
So when you keep using the term fill a hole, to be clear, you're talking about an emotional hole that my father gets lots of calls all the time, and he's stuck in his house, right? As are so many of us. He lives in another state, but still. And he doesn't have he has a giant social network, but not when everybody's in their house. He doesn't get to play poker every Friday night as he did forever and ever and ever up until March. And he'll get these calls and he'll tell me about them. And I say, why don't you just he knows what they are, hang up. And I think he wants to argue with them because he doesn't have that many other people to talk to.
Well, they want interaction. And, I hate to use, I'm using the word they, which is generalizing, but, for those purposes, these are people who, I say to, the 50-plus-year-olds, the Abuse in Later Life grant, later life starts at 50. So when I go out and talk to baby boomers who don't consider themselves to be part of the older population.
I know I'm not.
Right? And I talk about their parents and I say, when's the last time you called your mom, for example, and asked how her day was and actually listened to her answer, actually cared about her answer and engaged her in conversation? And, you can tell they sort of look away like, I'm not really good at that. And then I point out to them, who does? The scammers. The scammers have all damn day long to sit and listen to your mother's answer and to ask her in minute, details about her day and how she's doing and what's going on with her life. And that connection matters, and people will stay on the phone because it makes them feel relevant, like your dad. Here's somebody he can argue with. Here's someone he can engage with. People ask questions, how was your day? That may be the first time someone has asked that person how their day was in years. And there are people who go years without ever having anyone touch them, give them a hug, put a hand on their arm. These are real things that we don't like to talk about because, again, it's, it's squishy and we don't know what to do with it and it makes us awkward and it's not in my job description. But there, in my opinion, is your answer. There's how you start making a dent in the problem.
So just to add to that,
Brian.
That's pretty compelling, and social isolation has come up, especially in Theresa, and even on our own homeowners association here in Iowa City, it's become apparent. There are a lot of folks out there who are older in our community who we always assumed their family was around, to come by and take care of them. But what Theresa did was you can go by this house and it wasn't getting picked up. And then, somebody would check in and you'd realize, oh, Mrs. Smith, oh, right, her kid moved away. And the other compounding issue here is some of these folks are dementia's a slow moving onset. And so a lot of these folks are, as Chantelle said, they want the interaction. It's sort of a cat, it's gamey to them, but they also have decision-making challenges sometimes. They're in very mild stages of cognitive impairment, so they can get tricked easily, and that's what makes it extra difficult. But notwithstanding the need for us to increase the social engagement is again, we just haven't invested in this infrastructure at all. Relative to again, how the hospitals use your money as an insurance hire, a Medicare beneficiary, and how those hospitals take that money and create an infrastructure that I just described, at least
Right.
8 steps in any 30-minute visit. We don't have that. So, you know, the connection we found in women's violence issues and our studies with that is it really didn't rise to a level of public concern until local police stations actually started recording the number of phone calls that came in. Because you asked us earlier for numbers, right? That's always what
Yeah.
the politicians do. Give us numbers.
Yeah.
And we can't really put a scale on this yet to rise to their level of attention. I mean, we can with these stories. But we can say, look, last week in Des Moines, we had 13 of these calls come in that Chantelle described, and we located them. They're all in the same neighborhood. You know, it's not that hard to send a squad car out there, and you know that kind of stuff. And how do you? So the end question is, how do you get that? And you get that through money. And the state has to think about how, because this is a lot of these issues are state, they're not federal. So Chantelle, I think you're with the state office, right? There's a very clear line between what the Fed prosecutors can do and what our state prosecutors can do. And at the state level, this is where most of this stuff happens. And so are we going to, the state voters, the people in this audience need to decide, where is that money going to come from? And it could come from a prosecution of these scammers. They're taking money out of Iowa as part of the criminal justice. Some of that money should be brought back to fund these services. That's not happening right now. It's an easy investment for the state to make. Catch the people who do this, take their money back. You perpetually fund yourself. So that's one way to do this. It can happen. We just need to get more people interested and elevate it.
And I think that is one of our issues is, you know, in fairness to law enforcement, when you have money that ships directly to a foreign country, it's no small task to go get that money. But at the same time, I'll note that we have a heck of a lot of resources in foreign countries, hunting down drug dealers and, you know, dealing with those issues. And I think Brian, I agree with Brian, it's a priority. It's a question of what are your priorities. And, you know, I'll be the first one out there on the front line saying, you're talking about an entire category of people who we as a society have just determined are not worth it. And there's just no 2 cents. I mean, that's my 2 cents. There's no other way to put it, that they are lesser than, and that's for many reasons. You know, we could talk about for days the reasons behind that, but when you bring these issues up, it is very difficult to get movement at any level. We pitched an elder abuse bill last year for criminal penalties for elder abuse. It went through the Senate thanks to AARP's work. It got through the Senate unanimously, and then the pandemic hit and it didn't get out of the House. But we've been trying for years to get that done. And, you know, it's hard work. And frankly, I think, well, why is this so hard? It's hard work. And asking for money, DHS, the dependent adult abuse part of DHS, it gets no money. You know, they get, I think the last number I had from DHS was about $200,000 they get for dependent adult abuse, and that funds 3 people and the program. You know, and when you're talking about child abuse, you're talking about multi-millions of dollars. And not to say that children are not important, they are, but so are dependent adults. But this is the world that we live in. So it sure seems like every time we try to do something, we're going up a hill and then we're getting pushed down at the same time. So everything is a fight for us when you're talking about this population. So, you know, we sort of give up on the money. And I'm with Brian. I've been pitching for years. We need a one-stop shop. We need a one-stop shop for older Iowans who are victims of abuse, which includes scams. Instead of them calling and us saying, you call so-and-so, we need to do, as Brian is saying, like they do, you know, Mayo Clinic style is what I call it. You come here, we have everybody here, and we walk you from door to door, and we make sure you get the connections made that you need made. And we partner with the AAAs, and the AAAs have been great partners, and they're part of the coordinated community response team. We're networking, we're doing those things, but we can only do so much on our own backs, which is really what we are doing, including the AAAs.
To underscore your suspicion comments that we seem to care less about elder adults, if you remember in the early days of the pandemic, there was more than one person who said, well, it's only affecting those who are 81 and over, and so that's kind of okay.
Yeah, we asked we asked our older people, more than implied, that they needed to sacrifice themselves for the greater good. That's astounding. What society is that okay to say, first of all, and how is it okay to believe that, but to actually speak it? This is where we're at, and we're talking about ageism, we're talking about ableism, all of these things that are occurring at the same time. And so when we go to the legislature and make a pitch, I think that's, sometimes what we get back is, well, what about the children? What about this? What about that? There are limited resources. And it's been said to me, the resources are limited. Who are you going to take the money away from?
Yeah. All right. So Laura and Theresa, I want to come to you in our final 8 minutes here. So, and following up with what Brian and Chantelle were just saying, where they were talking about, Chantelle, I think you said that 95% of financial scams, if that's even the right term now, are coming from relatives.
No, 90% of elder abuse.
90% of elder abuse, yes.
It's committed by family members, yes. Yes.
So, Laura, Theresa, what other sorts of, what have we not talked about? What other sorts of, what other sorts of abuse are we looking at? And what are you seeing in terms of, is it really a high number of family members who are involved? It's like the old Pogo thing, we have met the enemy and he is us, kind of thing. We're the problem. We want to talk about solving it, but we're the problem. Chantelle's nodding her head. Yes, Laura, let's go to you first.
So, sorry, did you say Chantelle? Sorry about that.
I was just going to say, there is the problem. You just stated it quite well. Yeah.
Laura, what do you see?
I think it's important to note that a lot of these individuals, it's not just typically one type of abuse. There's several different types of abuse going on. So a lot of times, it might start out as, a family member is taking a little bit of money here and there, and then it's, then the person finds out about it. And so then there's the emotional abuse. It's, I'll throw you in a nursing home if you do anything about this, if you report this. Then maybe it steps up to the physical abuse where it's, shoving them, in their room and closing the door, because they're, asking them questions that they don't want to answer. I think it's important to note that a lot of times there's more than one type of abuse going on. And that's where, I think a lot of times it is, family members that are involved because, they're able to get so close to them that they can, access the money because there's a trust there, that they let them use their card to go buy groceries. And then they're, buying a bunch of gift cards on top of that while they're out shopping. And so, yes, absolutely. It's definitely family that we're seeing the most and that are actually, a lot of times the biggest type, the type that are escalating because it's, you can't imagine that they would do that to their family member. It's just horrendous. To touch on a few different types of people that are perpetrating, definitely we're seeing, friends or neighbors, again, people that are close to them, people that can get into their personal life and, either get into their home or get access to some of these things. And then that's where you then start to see also the, home care aides that, again, can get into the home and get close and, manipulate a situation where they can get access to that. And and so on. So, where we do hear about the strangers, the people that are calling in, or, showing up at the house, those are happening too, but it's definitely more of a situation where, they're vulnerable because they're allowing these people into their life that, are allowing them to be close to them, where that's definitely, scary that can happen to them.
Teresa, what do you think?
Oh, yeah, I absolutely agree. I see very dynamic family situations. And a lot of the times, even with speaking with them, and they're aware that the abuse is going on. They admitted they're being exploited. They don't really want to take that next step. They don't really want to throw it out there because they, oh, my daughter, she'll threaten, she won't let me see my grandchildren anymore. I hear that a lot. I have a homeless lady that I've been working with. She was evicted due to her grandson's drug problem. Kind of had a meth house. She didn't know anything was going on. I mean, I had worked with this woman in the past on the Illinois side for years, always had the same problem. It has been like 4 years now. She's now been evicted from her home because her grandson decided to have a meth lab going on in the basement. I mean, but this had been a problem for 7 years now, and it just finally escalated to that level. And now that I'm back on the Iowa side, she was able to get a hold of me because she's over in Iowa now, and she's homeless. And I was just literally, I just felt so sick to my stomach because I had already seen it years ago, and we helped, and we got things back on track for her. We were able to remove her from her one place, get her away, get the order of protection against the grandson. And somehow, some way, it was always, I don't want to see him go to jail. I don't want to, so she always wanted to protect him, even though, he had stole from her. He was very emotionally abusive to her. And then it became physical until the point where she was still protecting him that she lost her home. And this would literally just happen like 2 days ago, and I just was beside myself, but it happens, and it does, it happens. And again, she just absolutely loved her grandson. And this is where it led to her, is now that she's living in a motel right now. So yeah, I totally agree that they fear with the threat. They don't want to see their loved one in jail. They don't want to see them out on the street. They don't want to have the threat of, oh, I won't let you see your grandchildren anymore. So then it continues. They, again, they're lonely. They want to have an interaction. I won't come see you. I'll put you in a nursing home. So they have almost like they feel very, that they have no choice but to allow it, and it's so sad, and it's just so real, and most people cannot comprehend how could somebody treat their grandmother this way, how could somebody be this way to their mother, but it is very common, and it is always a very close family member. It's not some distant cousin that came up from nowhere. It's literally the grandson, the daughter, people, and I'll hear the stories that I never thought she would do this to me. I can't believe, and they're so in disbelief also that they can't believe that it's actually happening to.
All right, we've got 1 minute left. We're going to do a quick speed dating round robin here. I'm going to ask one question for each of you. If you would, I'm going to start with you because you're right. Well, we'll start with Laura. She's now on my screen. Laura, starting with you. So we've talked about a lot of things and a lot of issues, and what's always great about these panels is there are things that come up that, gee, I hadn't thought of that. Laura, what do we do? What can we do? What can we do? Is it a legislation problem? Is it a law enforcement problem? Is it a social problem? What do we do about some of these many issues? Go.
Oh man, loaded question. I'd say the above. I think awareness is the biggest thing. I think continue to talk about it, continue to advocate for your friends, your family members, anyone that that are in these situations. Don't let it just become a hidden issue like it's been for a long time, or just a family issue. That's another thing that we hear so often, that, even police being involved, this is a family issue, this is a civil issue. No, it's not. These people deserve justice. These people deserve to get out of these situations. So to keep it short and sweet, I'd say all the above. Just continue to talk about it, continue to bring it to the forefront, report it to authorities, report it to DHS, report it to the area agencies on aging, get media involved as much as you can.
Okay, Chantelle, last words. What can we do? Can anyone do?
I'm with Laura on all of the above, but I think most importantly, to Brian's point, we have to stop siloing ourselves and stop acting like each one of us in our organizations can address this issue. We have to work together.
Okay. Theresa, working together, is that gonna fix a lot of things? Can that?
Oh, absolutely. I believe in, it takes a village. Like, I will reach out. I've reached out to Chantelle on a really big case that I had issues with. And I mean, as soon as she got involved, it was like a turnaround. But sometimes, and it's not that, it's just, maybe reaching out, if she couldn't assist me, I would have been okay. She can't help, but she was able to help. And I will feel the same way if somebody calls me, hey, what can you do? What can you offer? Hey, I'm right here. Oh, I can't do this, but let me link you over here. Just kind of networking. Like, I think I'm big on networking, getting everybody together, involved, being parts of different groups with your community response group. Now I'm getting to know the faces, getting to know the names, like, oh, you know what, I'm going to call her. She might have some information on this. Or, we cover 17 counties. I may not be real familiar with Henry or Des Moines County because I live in Scott County. Maybe I can call her to see what can she advise me on. So I believe in that too, that networking, working together, and just building those resources.
All right, Brian, 20 seconds. Collaborations, that's going to solve everything?
These are 3 great people. They're spread out across the state. They need help. This needs to elevate to the level of our state policy leaders. They need to take a more concerted effort into this. Any fiscally responsible public official needs to stop the money flowing out of this state. This money is leaving Iowa and leaving our older Iowans, those who are most likely to vote, at risk for harm and neglect. This needs to stop.
Okay, Brian, thank you. I'm going to turn this back to Seth Smith. I want to thank all our panelists, Theresa, Chantelle, Laura, Brian. It was great. I knew it would be, and it's great. Seth, you want to take us home?
Yep, thank you, Michael. Be sure you guys stick around at 11 o'clock for the closing keynote with David Kennedy from the National Network for Safe Communities. Thanks again to all of our panelists and to Michael for moderating this session. Goodbye.
Thank you.
Thank
Bye.
you.